Well, hey there team, welcome back to the channel and welcome back to Worth It Then, Worth It Now, a sort of side project I run here on this channel where I look at games of yesteryear. They're not exactly contemporary or in vogue, but I feel that they deserve a bit more of a shout out of season. And generally speaking, I try my best to line this up with a sale where possible. So today we're looking at Surviving Mars, which sits under that umbrella of Paradox interactive games, so as you can probably guess, there's quite a bit of DLC that still stands apart from what I would probably call the core Paradox games, you know, your Stellaris and that sort of stuff. It's still a great game. This is one of my favorite colony builders. I'm an absolute nut for terraforming Mars as a sub-genre, and that's part of this game. A lot of it is about colonizing Mars, let's call it the first step off, right? Putting domes and supporting them with a whole humongous infrastructure. In turn, doing things like extending research projects and digging up rare earth minerals to send back to Earth for more funding. So the core of the game, as it is sans terraforming, pre-terraforming. However, there are multiple DLCs that have gone on to extend that experience, and one of them is, I think it's called Green Mars or something like that. Anyway, most of them are pretty good. There was one that got pretty slammed where you go underground, but all of this is going to get a revival. They've recently announced that there's a full remake, recreation, whatever of this game, which is kind of interesting to see. I'm a bit funny about the whole remake, remaster culture. It is a bit cheap, a bit safe, but we keep paying for it and they keep doing it. And generally speaking, they do it well. So like, you can't really blame an industry to respond to people throwing money at what they do. But there's nothing wrong with this version of the game, even though it's getting on in years. Currently, it's actually free to play at the time of this video within the next couple of days, so you can just give it a go. Other than that, it's on a fairly deep sale, like 60% off. The developer is Haemimont Games, who have had a little bit of an eclectic release in the past few years, so this to me is their big standout. But they also did Stranded, Alien Dawn, which was sort of an attempt at a RimWorld type game, but I mean, you can't really beat the king. And they also did Jagged Alliance 3. And while I wasn't exactly the biggest fan of that, I understand it's a pretty true to the Jagged Alliance series, so they're fairly reliable. And what's more, when they developed this particular game, this surviving game, Surviving Mars, they actually kicked off Paradox's attempt to make a running series under that label with varying success. The next one to follow was Surviving the Aftermath, which I think is quite not good, to put it politely. Tries to split the gameplay between two major loops, and one of them, the overworld board game loop, is kind of terrible. But then they also had Surviving the Abyss, which I really like. It had a rocky release through early access, and because it wasn't selling so well, they announced that they were just going to cease development and basically rug pull everybody. Everyone went ballistic at them for that, in which case they had a bit of a redemption arc where they finished it and pushed it over the line for 1.0. So the game's got faults, but I really enjoy the underwater component. So there's a little bit of a legacy behind this game, this series, and it all started with Surviving Mars. You don't need the DLC to play the core game. It is actually quite tricky. There is a few moving parts. One of the first big principles is establishing a foothold so that you can get your first dome running. And it's not a small task, because in the beginning, you start essentially with drones, and they in turn have their own mini sort of loop. You know, they can get dusty because they're all solar powered, in which case, you know, you have to send more drones to de-dust them. A lot of this happens automatically, but you got to be careful that if you don't consider these components, you can get in a lot of trouble. Things like just willy-nilly landing ships in the middle of your colony will blow dust over everything, which all needs to be serviced, and you can take a chunk out of your workforce because you just put the rocket in the wrong place. And through the course of that, you know, you have drone hubs, which are essentially like an AI center that will direct the drones, and there's a load component to it. So balancing the amount of hubs that you have with the amount of drones that you have versus the general automated work that's happening, you sort of get the picture. On top of that, you have to start running power lines, deal with the day-night cycle. That will then build into, you know, concrete as a build material. a fun part for me is the straddling, getting a helping hand from Earth with funding, supply rockets, sort of little prefabs as well, before you actually have the technology to, say, create a drone hub from scratch. That's probably a long way down the track. The research tree actually gets shuffled up a fair bit, so you're going to get a different experience, and you might have to lean on prefabs from Earth being sent through to actually plug holes in your supply chain issue. But yeah, a lot of it, the focus is about that, is about trying to get your foothold on Mars solid, but also leveraging your ability to get a leg up from home. And to keep that funding going, it really doesn't hurt to get an early economy sending back rare materials, and to do that you need to get colonists, because that's not a drone job. That's like heavy work in the mines. It requires more than just what a robot can do. And so then you start harvesting water and air, and you've got all these cool different machines to it. You're scanning the surface. You can do like away team rocket missions. A big part of sending rockets back is that you have to refuel them locally, so you have to come up with a system for that. Probably need a fuel plant prefab sent. You can send little emergency drop pods. They're very expensive, but they're a solution, like a stopgap. And then when you start bringing people in, you deal with, keeping them happy. You get people that get earth sick and want to go home. It has actually get into those, if someone's miserable enough, they will self-delete kind of thing. So, it's not trying to be dark, but it's also, I feel like this game has made a fair effort to try and have a look at a gamification of the issues that you probably would face in a colonizing Mars scenario. So I actually think, as far as a colony builder on Mars, this might be the best one going. And then that's not to even mention the whole terraforming component. There is research and tech trees, and they're all in different lines. But if you get the terraforming DLC, that adds a whole other aspect to greenifying Mars as well. Which, I'm not trying to put that as a footnote or an addendum, but it literally is a DLC that got added on later in the piece. It's a great value add, and it's worth having if you enjoy this game. So I'd say check it out while it's free now, or pick it up while it's on sale, and you'll probably get plenty of value just from the base game, to be perfectly honest, before you even need that peripheral stuff. But there's some good DLC there as well as time goes on. Anyway, Surviving Mars. It's cool to be playing this again. It's very addicting. I like a lot of the soundtrack and the radio tracks, and it's just very, very cool. And the fact that they're redoing it, and it's not a high-profile AAA first-person shooter or something like that, that's going to be interesting. A remake of a colony builder. I wonder how it will be received. Like, do you really care if the graphics aren't super cutting edge on a game where you're zoomed out 100 times? I don't know. I'm not sure how I feel, but in the meantime, playing this is certainly not going to hurt. Anyway, this game absolutely slaps. Give it a red hot go. Team Munch, just leave it there for the time being, and I'll catch you guys on the next one.